on WTTW.
On Masterpiece.
Me is no free.
The well-being of the workers is the key to the success of a plantation.
Such relief to have a true gentleman come to us as overseer.
We shall have the finest sugar crop in all of Jamaica.
I must confess, I thought I should never again be blessed with love.
I will need you all to work 7 full days a week from now on.
We'll be free, no. Just like you.
The Long Song on Masterpiece.
Sunday at 9 on WTTW. Programming on WTTW is made possible in part by viewers like you and by the following.
This is our great-grandfather who had a dream in 1945 to open a family business in his name. This is our grandfather who expanded on that dream, bringing custom furniture to Chicago. This is our father and his brothers who grew that dream into the 10 showrooms here today. This is us, 4 sisters who want to make the generations before us proud while making Chicago homes beautiful. Since 1945, this is Smith.
WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center.
These are more than just shopping centers for the community. They're gathering places where they maintain their culture.
Black joy and the Black experience is magical.
Hi, Chicago. I'm Destiny, and you're watching WTTW.
This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by a grant from the William F. O'Connor Foundation in memory of Billy O'Connor.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz is on assignment. On the show tonight,
with the conclusion of a careful federal review process that spanned several years, we're ready to get to work.
it's official. Groundbreaking for the Obama Presidential Center will begin this year. We hear from the Obama Foundation.
This is the quote-unquote Super Bowl of sports betting.
And it's not like the old days. Now you can legally bet on the Super Bowl in Illinois.
Drivers here in Chicago move the city.
A huge rise in carjackings, COVID-19, and a fight in Springfield on the horizon. Hear from Chicago area rideshare drivers.
Prioritize library workers and move us to phase 1B, or immediately move us to curbside assistance only.
The latest group fighting to get the COVID vaccine? Library workers. But are there enough doses to go around?
There's about 80,000 of them across the city.
Gage Park's historic bungalow district, now on the National Register of Historic Places. The significance of the single-family home in the neighborhood and across Chicago. The great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells writes a new biography on the trailblazing journalist and activist. And Jeffrey Baer on the history of the Sears sunken garden and the company that built it in an all-new Ask Jeffrey. But first, some of today's top stories. Chicago Public Schools says it's working on a response to the most recent counterproposal received from the Chicago Teachers Union late this afternoon. It's the latest in negotiations between the two sides as parents await word on whether students can return to their school buildings. This morning, Mayor Lori Lightfoot turned up the heat, growing impatient that they haven't reached a deal and blaming the union for not responding to the district's proposals.
I've heard from parents, why did you not let us know last night sooner? Because we were waiting on the CTU. And on the off chance that we had the ability to actually get a breakthrough, we wanted to be able to share that news. But we waited and waited and waited and waited. Time's up.
Now, today was another day of remote learning as the city agreed to extend that 48-hour cooling off period into a third day. For now, the two sides tentatively agree on testing, ventilation, PPE, safety committees, and workspaces. But they're still working through health metrics on which to close schools, a vaccine plan, and granting accommodations for employees who live with people who have medical risks. Another point of contention is making improvements for remote learning. In a news conference this morning organized by the union, some parents spoke out about how remote learning is working for their families and should be allowed to continue until schools are safer.
Though it's from the computer, it's virtually, the students are learning. My kids have been learning. My pre-K, he knows how to write his name. He knows his numbers. He knows his letters. The teachers have been doing a great job virtually. So why would they not allow them to keep doing that? So we're asking the mayor to please CPS reinstate these teachers that are doing a great job.
A number of teachers have been locked out of their Google Classroom accounts, deemed AWOL by the district. CEO Janice Jackson says there has to be accountability for the teachers who refuse to report to work or provide an explanation about why they're not at work. Now, the semester ended today, and tomorrow is already scheduled as a day of no instruction for students, but planning for teachers. Illinois public health officials report more than 3,300 new cases of COVID-19 and 69 additional deaths. This brings the state's total case count to more than 1.13 million people, with 19,444 total deaths. Additionally, the state has added 80 new vaccination sites, including Walgreens, Jewel, and Mariano's pharmacies, as well as 2 National Guard assisted sites opening today in St. Clair County and at Triton College in Cook County. And now to Phil Ponce with what to expect from the Obama Presidential Center. Phil.
Brandis, it is official. After a 4-year federal review, construction on the Obama Presidential Center in Jackson Park will start this year, perhaps as early as August. President Barack Obama made the announcement on Twitter.
With the conclusion of a careful federal review process that spanned several years, we're ready to get to work.
The Obama Foundation says the 4-building Southside campus will take 4 years to complete and shared a few other figures, including $500 million in construction costs, an economic impact of more than $3 billion for Cook County, up to 5,000 direct and indirect jobs, as well as 700,000 projected annual visitors. And joining us to discuss plans for the Obama Presidential Center is Michael Strautmanis. He is Chief Engagement Officer of the Obama Foundation. And Mr. Strautmanis, thank you for joining us. If you were in an elevator and you had 30 seconds to describe the project to somebody in that elevator with you, how would you describe it physically?
Okay, go. Great museum and other amenities. There will be a teaching garden, a branch of the Chicago Public Library, all set within a beautiful park, and activities and spaces for people to come and learn and enjoy. But I say most importantly, we're breathing new life into Jackson Park. This is going to be a catalyst for the south side of Chicago, and I think a great example of what the city stands for and what people should reference when they talk about the city of Chicago. They should talk about the Obama Presidential Center, and they should talk about this being a place where somebody can come that has big dreams and achieve them and go even beyond. So I'll probably take more than 30 seconds, Phil, because I'm excited, so I'll just stop there.
Well, maybe it's a long elevator ride, so you would have more time. But the estimated cost you're saying is about $500 million. Do you have that money in hand?
We do. We do. Now, look, there's a lot more that we want to do than just build the Presidential Center itself. We have programming that's going to happen in and around it. That program, by the way, programming has already started and will continue even throughout this build. You know, President and Mrs. Obama are dedicated to giving the tools and the inspirations, particularly to young people, to be able to become civic actors and get involved in civic life. We're going to endow the Presidential Center. So I wouldn't say to everybody, close your wallets. We're going to need your help. But yes, we have the funds ready to bring the Presidential Center to Chicago.
As you know, this process has gone on for about 4 years with a lot of community opposition, at least very vocal community opposition, concerning rising rents and rising property values that might displace people. What's the latest on that?
Well, I think, first of all, we should just talk about where we started and where we've gone to today. Yes, people were thrilled, overwhelmingly thrilled that the Presidential Center was coming to the south side of Chicago, and particularly this neighborhood that has been starved of meaningful investment, I'd say, for generations. But we knew that there would be consequences, and I think people were worried about unintended consequences. And so we heard concerns about people, about gentrification and displacement. And what made me so proud is that the community, the leaders, government, city council, the mayor got together to craft a solution around that. And so there's an ordinance in place for the neighborhood to preserve affordable housing. But, we'll have other opportunities and challenges along the way. We want to hire and have this be a model for a diverse workforce in construction. And we're going to need people's support to rally around to do that. And so I think that what we've seen is that this isn't just talk, and people aren't just talking. They're putting plans in place, they're creating solutions, and just to bring it back home, that is like what the Obama Foundation is all about. So it's very appropriate. And I hope people take a look at the details.
Well, as you know, some opponents of the project just announced in connection with your announcement that they felt that the federal review was, quote, specious and that further legal action is imminent. Was it specious?
Well, Bill, I used to act as a lawyer. I went to law school at University of Illinois, go Illini, but I'm not anymore, so I'm not going to define or respond as specious. What I will say is this, as you said, has been a long review. I'd also note that this is a very small but vocal number of people, many of whom I believe, and I don't know this to be the case, but I haven't seen them around the neighborhood as I've been walking around and doing my work there. And it's been 4 years. Every inch of the tire has been kicked on this thing. Every question that I could think of, and even plenty that I didn't think of, has been asked and answered by experts at the city, federal, and state level. So what I'd say to everyone who wants to make this project better, accept the decision that's been made and come help us get this done right, because this is a big deal and we don't have all the answers. So we're gonna need that support. If someone decides they want to challenge this, we're gonna vigorously defend it. These folks lost at the district level, they lost in the 7th Circuit. And so we'll continue to move forward with this project, because the one thing that's not acceptable right now is the status quo. People are ready for economic development. People are excited that the Obama Presidential Center is coming to Chicago. So I've got to get to work to deliver on that.
So would you say this is a done deal? The projection is, the estimate on your part is that construction will actually start in August. Do you think that will actually happen?
Oh, yes. Construction will start this year. Now, I don't get into dates and I don't say done deal because, I've just been around for a long time and I don't like to make promises I can't keep. But we are prepared to bring this to the city. Construction's going to begin in August. The city's ready to do its work. And I just really want to shout out all of the, I got I'm at home, Bill, working. And so my daughter's here. I use phrases like shout out. I'll probably never say it again now that I said it on TV. A thank you to everybody that's been involved and engaged in it. A thank you to the mayor and her team for their hard work. And particularly a thank you to the community that has heard promises before that haven't been delivered for believing in us and helping us get this done.
You emphasize that this isn't just a bricks and mortar project, that there are other things that will go along with it. How would you define if this center is a success? What does success mean to you?
Success means a couple things to me. The first is we're expecting visitors from across the street, from across the city, from around the country and around the world, all to gather. And so I want to see that mix of people coming together, enjoying this beautiful park, participating in all the activities at the center, and then not stopping there, but going into the neighborhood. We're creating a museum campus with the Museum of Science and Industry. Let's stop there. And let's open up their wallets, to say the phrase again, and spend some dollars in the neighborhood and the community. So I think that's successful. But to me, most important is that, some young person who frankly maybe even isn't alive right now as I'm here today, comes to the center and is inspired to live out their dreams. That's what President Obama did when he came to Chicago. That's what Mrs. Obama did as she grew up just blocks away from this center. I'm talking to you today because somebody invested in libraries and museums so that I could, a kid who's a parent of a couple of school teachers could go and work at the White House and come and bring a presidential center to my hometown. So that's what's most important to me, and that's what success looks like.
Michael Stratmanis, thank you so much for this update. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil.
And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Phil, thank you. 12 Illinois sites were added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2020. Gage Park's historic bungalow district on the city's southwest side is one of them. WTTW News Director and Latino Voices host Hugo Balta, along with producer Marissa Nelson, spent the day reporting in Gage Park, the latest stop in our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. And Hugo Balta joins us now with more from inside the Gage Park Latinx Council's Cultural Center. Hugo.
Good evening, Brandis. Chicago's home to nearly 80,000 bungalows, most of them built in the early 1900s. The single-family home provided an affordable way to get home ownership. A century ago, first-generation Americans lived in bungalows still standing today in Gage Park.
This city that's so old, I think it's important to keep that historic value.
Are on the National Register of Historic Places. The Gage Park Bungalow Historic District is the latest to be added. Carla Bruni of the Chicago Bungalow Association made the nomination.
The first bungalow in the actual district is 1919.
Bungalows have been an essential part of Chicago's landscape for more than a century. As the city's population grew in the early 1900s, subdivisions of brick bungalows were built in neighborhoods surrounding Chicago Center. It came to be known as the Bungalow Belt, sweeping across the city from the far south side to the far north. Located roughly 7 miles southwest of the Loop, many of Gage Park's bungalows were built between 1924 and 1927. The historic district is bounded to the north and south by 55th and 59th Streets, and by Washtenaw and Sacramento Avenues to the east and west.
We had a huge population boom because we had a huge immigration boom, and bungalows they sort of filled in this gap. It was, the city was responding by having these luxury high-rises and also tenement housing. So the bungalow comes along, and it's this surprisingly affordable alternative to that.
Adapted from the California cottage in the 19th century, local architects modified the bungalow style to match the city's narrow lot size, creating what is now known as the Chicago bungalow. The single-family home is marked by a narrow rectangular shape, low roof overhang, and generous window space. Gage Park resident Adriana Vargas and her mom have owned their bungalow for 6 years. Located just outside the bounds of the historic district, the home was built in 1920.
For us, it's like the American dream, right? You want to look for that, single-family home where you can stay forever. And this has been it.
The designation in the National Register of Historical Places is mostly an honorary one, recognizing an area's historic and social significance. Bruni tells us that it does not come with any new regulations or fees to residents, but if someone were to come wanting to bulldoze a highway through the district, well, it would require a special review. Coming up, we'll be speaking to community and health leaders about the COVID-19 vaccination distribution here in Gage Park. But for now, back to you, Brandis.
Hugo, thank you. Whether you're in it for the football, the commercials, or the food and friends, the coronavirus means Sunday's Super Bowl will be different this year. But something else about this year's matchup is new. You don't have to travel to Vegas to legally bet on it. Amanda Venicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Brandis, maybe you've played squares at a Super Bowl party, or there are those who perhaps had an off-the-books bookie or maybe used an offshore gaming website. That sort of thing was illegal, and that is what is different in Illinois for Super Bowl 55.
This is the first time we'll be able to do a legal sports bet on a Super Bowl, so we're excited.
Mike Zaleski helped to shepherd through the state law that made it happen. He says it's been a long time coming. Illinois passed the law legalizing sports wagering in 2019. Then the first sports book at the Rivers Casino in Des Plaines opened last March. Soon after, it had to shut down because, of course, of COVID-19. Now, that and other physical sports books have been open intermittently since then, depending on COVID restrictions. Arguably the biggest, well, game changer came last summer when online betting apps premiered. They've been going strong since, but Sunday, well, that's when it's really game time. Zaleski will be watching the game, but also how much sports books report people having wagered on it.
This is the quote unquote Super Bowl of sports betting. It's the Super Bowl and it's the Super Bowl of sports betting. So it's the day of the year besides the NCAA tournament where we expect these numbers.
No school or library operating funds, but rather the state's share of those gambling taxes and fees is marked to it's for infrastructure upgrades of public buildings. We won't know how much revenue Super Bowl bets rake in for at least a month and a half, but the sports betting handle in November, those are our latest figures that we have from the gaming board, reached nearly $450 million. And Illinois gets a chunk of that. And annually, the state could be looking at taking in $70 million in revenue from sports betting. Now, because we are in phase 4 of state coronavirus mitigations, sports books are open for business, including at Hawthorne Racetrack in Cicero, which this fall became the first horse racetrack to offer, that is, a sports book. Hawthorne's racing analyst Jim Miller says it's like a sports book in Vegas, and people can come on Sunday, although only at 25% capacity because of COVID.
And because this is our first Super Bowl with legalized sports betting, we're not sure what the crowds are going to be. Now, us at Hawthorne, we're equating it to Kentucky Derby Day. That's the biggest race in racing. And you get a lot of people that come out and place wagers on one race each and every year, and that's the Derby. So we're going to treat the Super Bowl the same way. So we'll be staffed up. We want to make everything convenient. We want to make everything easy.
There is another in-person option, sort of a more old school one that doesn't require staying and hanging out at the sports book.
But the one thing that I really expect to see is something very similar to what we see for Kentucky Derby. And that's that bet and go type of setup. The people that want to come in, place those wagers, and then go home and watch the game. And we have that ability to do that too. So they can come out, place their wagers with a live teller or on a kiosk, place them early in the day. They can make them days prior to the game as well. Then go home, enjoy the game, and then maybe come back and hopefully cash those wagers in the days after.
Or you can place a wager online. There are a lot of options for that, but actually, not as many as you may think. Wagers are limited to conduct directly under the NFL's control or jurisdiction. The director of Illinois' gaming board laid out the rules during a virtual meeting last week. What happens on the field, well, that's allowed.
Such as comparing the length of a drive to the length of the national anthem, etc. Any occurrences related to the referee's conduct of the game.
What color Gatorade the winning team pours on a coach's head? Also legal, and that's because those involved are subject to the NFL's policies. Also okay, coin flips, penalties, and how long halftime goes, but not length of the national anthem or
content of the halftime show. So that would include the number of songs, the order of songs, wardrobe changes, special appearances, costume malfunctions, etc.
No bets either on coaches and players after game conduct, besides, of course, that Gatorade dumping.
For example, that would mean you cannot wager on the content of a post-game speech, how, when, if, whether a player says he's going to Disney World, whether a player announces his retirement, whether a player proposes to his fiancée, etc.
Now, he admits that these are the sort of novelty bets that help to popularize sports wagering, particularly with those who maybe aren't regularly into it. And of course, the more popular, the more revenue for the state of Illinois. But he says these restrictions are about conducting betting according to the highest ethical standards to maintain the public's confidence. Hawthorne analyst Miller says there are still ways to have fun with it.
There's a great bet through PointsBet. It's called the Devin Hester's House Call Super Boost. And the last time the Bears were in the Super Bowl, Devin Hester returned to kick for a touchdown. His Super Boost through PointsBet you get 17 to 1 odds if anybody returns a kick for a touchdown. So that's one of the cool things that we get to see is some of those just different quirky kind of bets where you can sit there, just put a couple dollars down, but it gives you that rooting interest in the game.
Speaking of rooting interest, Hawthorne, by the way, does have a partnership with PointsBet. Now, critics say that Illinois is preying on gambling addicts by getting into this sports wagering business and wanting it to be popular. The Gaming Board also held a special meeting today and gave preliminary approval for a Hard Rock casino in Rockford. That is not a completely done deal, but it is much farther along than Chicago's casino. Brandis, back to you. And by the way, I don't plan on betting personally, but I am looking forward to having some of those Super Bowl snacks.
And the commercials in a good game, hopefully. Amanda, thank you. Up next, the pressures rideshare drivers are facing. Stick around.
What can you tell us about how Chicago small businesses are doing? These are more than just shopping centers for the community. They're gathering places where they maintain their culture.
Chicago has seen a swift and dangerous increase in carjackings, with more than 1,400 reported in 2020, including crimes that have targeted rideshare drivers. Those drivers have been facing other pressures in the past year, too, working in close contact with passengers during the pandemic and a huge drop in demand. And amid both of those issues, ride-sharing platforms and other app-based companies are gearing up for a fight over whether gig workers should be classified as employees. Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg has this story.
Chicago police say there were nearly 218 carjackings in January, nearly 3 times what the city saw in January 2020. Rideshare drivers are among the recent victims and say it's top of mind every time they're on the road.
You just always got your radar up about who's around, you know, what the other cars are doing.
You know, I'm steady looking in the rearview mirror, you know, and it shouldn't have to be like that.
The spike in carjackings also comes amid the pandemic that's upended the rideshare industry, along with everything else.
After a passenger gets out the car, you know, you wipe the door or you spray it with Lysol.
I carry masks just in case passengers don't have any, because you just never know.
And like many other frontline workers, they're doing a difficult and potentially dangerous job, often with low pay and infrequent tips, according to a new study from the University of Illinois and the Illinois Economic Policy Institute.
This is really a very difficult form of employment to earn a middle-class income. And the opportunities to generate revenue are actually quite muted.
The study analyzed publicly available data for 80,000 rideshare trips in Chicago in September 2019 and September 2020, and it found that in many instances, drivers made below minimum wage. COVID also meant fewer rideshare drivers on the road and fewer trips by those still working. The study's authors say the city could mandate that drivers make the minimum wage after expenses on the state or even federal level.
Classify these drivers as employees and grant them the full employment rights that and access to basic labor protections that all W-2 employees have. And that includes things like minimum wage laws, unemployment insurance benefits, workers' compensation benefits.
State lawmakers are working on a bill that would likely do just that. The sponsors hope to introduce it during the current legislative session. Rideshare driver Stephen Everett is also an organizer with the Chicago chapter of the Independent Drivers Guild, which helped push for minimum pay and benefits in New York City. They're not taking a position on the bill until they see it, but Everett says,
we want the gig companies to know that if there's no driver, there's no gig company, there's no Uber, there's no Lyft.
With legislation on the horizon, rideshare companies are gearing up. An Illinois super PAC funded by rideshare company Lyft has spent $1.2 million donating to dozens of nonprofits and supporting political candidates. Organizer Lenny Sanchez expects what he calls a misinformation campaign.
Their misinformation is that if this were to happen, that drivers would lose their flexibility and their ability to work when they want, and that is completely false.
But driver Darren Hurd says he's not misinformed, and while he appreciates what minimum pay and benefits could mean for drivers, he also appreciates the independence that comes with being a contractor.
everybody doesn't get involved in gig economy work because they want to have a retirement account or healthcare benefits. Some people just need it if they just want to have a tank of gas to fill up their car, or if they're trying to buy Christmas presents for their family, or if they're just trying to make a couple extra bucks to invest.
Hurd's involved with the Illinois Coalition for Independent Work, which says it's a nonprofit funded by Uber, Lyft, Postmates, Instacart, and DoorDash. As lawmakers consider legislation on how employees are classified, Hurd says they should give gig work a try.
Then they'll have that valuable experience to take to the decision-making table to say, hey, I've done this before. I see why these gig economy workers really want that freedom of choice.
But Drivers Guild organizers say it's not an either-or choice, and they say a seat at the table through collective bargaining would let them better advocate for drivers, like pushing companies to verify passengers' identities and requiring them to post a photo. Regardless of what comes out of Springfield or City Council, the spike in carjacking and driver safety is the group's top priority.
We want to be able to earn an honest, good living and be able to come home from our jobs safely. It's just really dire to be a gig worker and a driver full-time nowadays, and even prior to the pandemic.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
The Independent Drivers Guild has a petition calling on gig companies to work with drivers to address the spike in carjackings. You can find more information on our website. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, how the coronavirus has exacerbated food insecurity in Chicago's Gage Park neighborhood. We hear from a community organizer. Chicago librarians are fighting to get in line for the vaccine, why they say they need it now. A new biography on a woman whose legend looms large in Chicago, activist Ida B. Wells, and it's written by her great-granddaughter. And Jeffrey Baer on the status of a historic garden in the North Lawndale neighborhood in an all-new Ask Jeffrey. But first, some more of today's top stories. Chicagoans are hunkering down for more brutal winter weather in the coming days. It started this afternoon with what looked like a snow globe, flurries, and snow up to 3 inches. The National Weather Service says tonight temperatures will plummet and stay down into early next week, maybe beyond. Sunday, for example, the high will be in the single digits and some overnight lows below zero, with wind chill values well below zero, like 12 or lower, 12 below or lower. To temporarily shut down 4 of its COVID-19 testing facilities. The facilities require staff members and volunteers to work outside while testing people in their cars. Even though they've been winterized, Public Health Commissioner Dr. Allison Arbody says the severe drop in temperatures means it won't be safe for anyone to be outside for an extended period of time. Now, the 4 locations are at Midway Airport, Prosser Career Academy, Saucedo Scholastic Academy, and Gately Park. The centers will be closed from Friday through Wednesday. Warming centers, though, will be open with COVID-19 safety protocols in place. Face masks can even be provided to people who need them at the city's warming centers. The Department of Emergency Management and Communications says whenever the temperature is below 32 degrees, the warming centers are open at community service centers from 9 to 5 on weekdays and as needed during the evening and the weekend. Chicago residents can call 311 to locate a center. And state public health officials report 3,300 more people have been diagnosed with COVID-19 and another 69 have died. This brings the state's total case count to 1.13 million people with 19,444 more deaths. Gage Park on the southwest side sits within 2 zip codes that have consistently seen some of the highest COVID positivity rates in the city. Ugo Balta joins us again from Gage Park, where he spent the day reporting as a part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Ugo.
Thanks, Brandis. I'm here with Dan Fulweiler, President and CEO of Esperanza Health Centers, which has a pediatric center here in Gage Park, and this week launched a mass vaccine station through the Southwest. Dan, throughout the pandemic, we've seen the Southwest side, Gage Park, be hit hardest with the pandemic. Almost a year in, where's the community now?
Well, it's as you said, Ugo, it's been a hard time, and that would be understating it. At Esperanza, we've done almost 40,000 COVID tests this year. and over 7,000 of them have been positive. So almost 20% of our patients as a whole have had COVID by now, and it's been very difficult on every level. We receive requests from people all the time for things that might surprise you. We had a patient a couple weeks ago come to our patient emergency fund because they needed $200 to pay for a cremation. Those kind of things are heart-wrenching, and it's really hard to see how the pandemic has affected us.
Let's talk about the vaccine rollout. A lot of criticism around who's getting the vaccine, when they're getting the vaccine. Esperanza is administering vaccines. From your perspective, how are we doing?
It's a mixed bag, and I guess I would say probably on the poor side of that mixed bag. You know, the rollout from the federal level has been so chaotic that it's been very hard to plan. So they're asking us to do this fairly complex prioritization of patients, which I think is important to get the most vulnerable people protected first. But that makes it really hard to get in, especially our elderly patients. They need a little time to make their appointments. They don't have text messaging. We really have to do calls to them just to make the appointments. And we don't know how much vaccine we're getting until 1 week before. In fact, 3 days before. And because of that, it's really hard to just plan how many appointments to make. We've worked around most of that. The city has been very helpful in trying to get us the information as fast as we can, and they've also really been pushing a lot of vaccines to us, which has been great. But it is a huge logistical challenge, and there's really no money to do it. In this fee-for-service environment, we're just going to have to bill insurance companies for that, and for the uninsured, the federal government.
A large portion of the population here in Gage Park is Hispanic Latino, and your staff is bilingual. How important is it for information like COVID-19, the vaccine rollout, for it to be in the language that people feel comfortable in?
It would really be hard to understate the importance of that. I think there's been a lot of talk in the media lately about vaccine hesitancy. We're actually not really seeing that very much with our patients. We find that as soon as we talk to them about that and spend time answering their questions, which are really valid, important questions, almost all of them are willing to get the vaccine. So this is going to be a process of communication and education and really making sure that people have their valid questions answered. And that has to be done in their language. There's no other way to do it.
Do you think Gage Park and the Southwest Side is getting the amount of doses it needs?
I would say no, but that is not for lack of trying. I think it is because there simply aren't enough doses. Though it's very clear from the maps that are being published that there are more doses going to the north side right now where there is less incidence of disease. And I think that that's something that we have to really pay attention to as a city and comes to terms with. And I'll be looking at that closely over the coming weeks to see if that really turns around.
Thank you very much. Dan Weiler, Esperanza Healthcare Center. We'll be back in a couple of minutes to talk to how a new program helping DACA students here in Gage Park. But for now, back to you, Brandis.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you. Up next, the fight for Chicago's library workers to get vaccinated. Stick around.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
Chicago's libraries have been open since June, and though some safety measures are in place, library workers say it's their turn to get the COVID-19 vaccine.
Since there seems to be no consensus among city leaders, library workers are left wondering when, if ever, we will be treated with dignity by the city that we continue to risk our health to serve during the pandemic.
And WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, what are library workers asking for and why?
Well, they want to be eligible for the vaccine now in the second phase of the vaccination effort that includes frontline essential workers like teachers and grocery store workers and police officers and firefighters. But they are in the next phase, which is not likely to start in Chicago until the end of March, with the rest of the essential workers like you and me, journalists, and every other city employee. They say they're putting their lives on the line right now and need to be vaccinated immediately.
Heather, are other groups asking to be moved up in the vaccination effort too?
They sure are. State lawmakers, legislators specifically, asked Governor Pritzker to allow them to be vaccinated in this phase now, and Governor Pritzker agreed. So sometimes these pleas can really sort of change things. However, there still remains a significant shortage of vaccines. So even if library workers were moved up, which city officials say they won't do, there probably is not enough vaccine to vaccinate all 900 or 1,000 workers who staff Chicago's libraries.
Okay. Heather Sharon, thanks as always.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. Up next, the great-granddaughter of legendary journalist Ida B. Wells in a conversation that first aired on our Sunday program, Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. But first, a look at the weather. Journalist, publisher, and activist Ida B. Wells is known for standing up for what she believed in despite the risk of retribution. Whether it was refusing to leave a segregated train car or boldly investigating and publicizing lynchings in the South, Wells put herself in harm's way to enact change. Author Michelle Duster has written a new biography on the trailblazing journalist and activist called Ida B. the Queen, The Extraordinary Life and Legacy of Ida B. Wells. And Duster has an intimate relationship with her subject. She's Wells' great-granddaughter. Joining us is the author, Michelle Duster. And Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. First, why did you want to write this book about your great-grandmother?
I decided to write Ida B. the Queen at this time because I think it's important to introduce my great-grandmother's life and legacy to a new generation that can help them understand the difference between, well, the similarities between the past and the present. And I think I tried to tie the work that my great-grandmother did to what is happening today. So hopefully it contextualizes and helps modernize her story.
And you say, introduce her to a new audience. It seems like a very accessible book. Who is this book for?
I think this book is for anybody who's interested in history, anybody who's interested in the story of Black America, anybody who's interested in women's empowerment. So there are a lot of people that I think can enjoy the book.
Even though you're her great-granddaughter, you learned a lot about her yourself in the process of researching and writing this book. Tell us a little bit about that part of your journey.
Right. Well, I mean, I grew up hearing bits and pieces of my great-grandmother's story. I think the way most people hear about their family members, just kind of sprinkled in conversation. But as far as the depth of the danger that she dealt with and the sense of loss, the depth of the loss that she experienced, I didn't know those type of details until I started doing more research and reading through her diary and then reading some of the chronicles of the lynchings. She wrote several pamphlets that chronicled and documented excruciating detail about lynchings. And that was not information that I was necessarily told when I was a child.
Now, you write about several touchstone events that served as sort of the catalysts for her career and her activism, like the murder and lynching of Thomas Moss and his business partners, Will Stewart and Calvin McDowell, and that was in Memphis in 1892. What do you think it was that drove her pursuit for justice?
Well, I mean, I can gather that Ida got a sense of what was right and wrong and what the possibilities were for freely enslaved African Americans, because she was born in the middle of this Civil War. So she came of age during Reconstruction with parents who were progressive and civically and politically engaged. And so I think she had a strong sense of possibility. And once there started to be pushback and backlash against Black progress, I think she just felt a sense of indignation of what this country was versus what it could be. And I think it was personal for her, a personal loss, because she had lost her parents, and then Thomas Moss in particular was a really good friend of hers. So I think sometimes when things are personal, then it drives you a little bit more to do something and, kind of work on the advocacy to make some kind of changes.
And we know that, she also fought for women's suffrage, but she wasn't afraid to call out the unequal treatment from even within the movement. For example, attempts to placate the Southern suffragists by asking black women to march towards the back of a D.C. protest. But of course, we know that Ida B. Wells, she did make her way to the front of that march. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, exactly what you said. So first of all, my great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, founded the Alpha Suffrage Club in 1913 because she had been involved with organizations that were working for suffrage, and there was a feeling that Illinois was going to grant women the right to vote. So she founded that, and then shortly thereafter, the Illinois delegation of suffragists went to Washington, D.C., and she was with white people, white suffragists representing the state. And so when they asked black women to march in the back, she refused and famously inserted herself into the Illinois delegation during the march. So that was significant because, she was working with these people in Illinois. So why separate herself once she got to Washington, D.C.?
And, lastly, while I've got you, Michelle, I have to get your reaction to the importance of the new vice president taking the oath.
That was such a touching moment for me to watch the combination of Sonia Sotomayor, who's a Supreme Court justice, swearing in Kamala Harris, two women of color in these powerful positions. And so to me, that was just such an amazing moment. And it made me think about all of the women, including my great-grandmother, who have fought for over 160 years for this moment to be possible.
And here we are. Again, the name of Michelle Duster's new book is Ida B. the Queen, The Extraordinary Life and Legacy of Ida B. Wells. And Duster will be appearing in a new WTTW documentary about Ida B. Wells. You can watch for that special episode of Chicago Stories in May. But for now, our thanks to Michelle Duster for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And there's more Chicago Tonight just ahead, so stick around. And now we check back in with Ugo Balta. He spent the day in Gage Park on the city's southwest side as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Ugo.
Thank you, Brandis. We're joined right now with Antonio Santos, the co-founder and executive director of the Gage Park Latinx Council. Welcome. Just this month, you are adding to your food distribution program. Tell us a little bit about Comida es Lindo.
Yeah, so Comida es Amor is the name of our February food initiative. We're giving out 12,000 pounds of food in addition to our weekly Mercadito that we run here at the Gage Park Cultural Center. This is a collaboration with Esperanza Health Centers to kind of help meet the need that we're seeing for food insecurity in our community. Today, we were able to give out 3,000 pounds of food in 15 minutes, which really speaks volumes to the need that is all around our community.
Congratulations. And last month, you announced a DACA application scholarship for 30 residents, which is roughly $500 of fees paid over two years. How has COVID-19 worsened the financial situation of the community?
Yeah, so we know that over 50% of Gage Park lives at or below the poverty level, and that's pre-pandemic. So with the pandemic and layoffs, we know that many more people are facing job insecurity, food insecurity, and that when folks can't even figure out where their next meal is coming from, a $500 application fee for DACA is really unfeasible. And it's an important piece of paper because it allows folks to work and contribute to their household. So if they're not able to afford to renew their DACA, they can no longer work or go to school, which kind of puts them back in a bad situation.
President Biden has signed a number of executive orders undoing the previous administration's work around this space. What are you hoping for from this administration when it comes to immigration?
We hope for a pathway to citizenship for those who choose to go down that path. We hope that the children at the border will be reunited with their families and let out of detention centers. We hope that the promises that the Democratic Party has been giving for many years become something of a reality now that we have control. We are hopeful of these things, but we are skeptical as well.
We're almost a year into COVID-19. How has the community fared throughout this time? What are you seeing? What are you hearing from the community in regards to not only their physical, but their emotional health?
Yeah, so Gage Park and 60632 are amongst the hardest hit in Chicago. Unfortunately, we haven't seen many more resources allocated to our community in the past 9 months. So there is a sense of hopelessness, of being left behind, as we see maps coming out showing allocation of resources to wealthier North Side neighborhoods, while folks in our community are dying at disproportionate rates. There's this fear that the folks with access will move on from COVID and leave folks living in poverty behind to deal with it.
We've got a minute left. You spoke very much about the discrepancies in regards to access to health care. Is it the same for the rollout of the vaccine? What are you seeing?
Yeah, we know from the numbers of who has been vaccinated that there is discrepancy. There are less vaccines going to Black and brown communities on the south and west sides. We are hopeful that this is something that will change, but again, always skeptical.
Thank you very much. Antonio Santos with the Gage Park Latinx Council. Brandis, back to you.
Ugo, thank you. Up next, the historic Sears sunken garden in an all-new Ask Jeffrey.
Ask Jeffrey is brought to you in part by BMO Harris Bank.
Wow, you ready?
Yeah, let me just grab my wallet.
Uh-oh, I've seen this before. Wallet way too big, skinny jeans too skinny.
I'll just carry it.
Before you break something, you should know you don't actually need a wallet. With BMO Harris, you can just take cash out with your phone. Or if you need to, you can pay them with Zelle. That works? Yeah. You're stuck, aren't you? Smile. Woo! Those jeans are way too tight.
That feeling you get when no wallet is no big deal. That's the BMO effect.
While Chicago may be on the verge of a particularly brutal cold snap, warmer days are just around the corner. We hope. To give us a little taste, Jeffrey Bear is here with more on the past, present, and future of a historic West Side garden in this week's Ask Jeffrey. Jeffrey, the question is, what's the story behind the Sears sunken garden in North Lawndale? Who designed it, and what was it used for? This comes from Liz in Lake Forest.
Well, yeah, like the rest of Chicago, the garden is under more than a foot of snow right now. But as you mentioned, Brandis, we thought maybe answering this question would give us all a glimmer of hope for warmer days to come. Let's see what the garden looks like when it's not covered with snow. The Sears sunken garden still stands across the street from the original Sears, Roebuck & Company headquarters in North Lawndale, which is on Chicago's west side. When the famous mail order company opened this complex in 1906, it claimed that this was the largest mercantile plant in the world. Sears printed its catalog here and handled distribution of its merchandise. Today, much of the factory has been torn down, although what's known as the original Sears Tower still stands on Homan Avenue. It's been repurposed as a community center and an event space. It was designed by the architectural firm of Nimmons and Fellows. The Sears headquarters was sort of like a city within a city for thousands of people who worked there. It housed a post office and a few restaurants and even a private bank. So the sunken garden that our viewer is asking about was one of the amenities. It was situated right across the street from the administration building. The idea was to give employees a quiet break outdoors during their lunch hour or even after work, in sharp contrast to the dense urban neighborhoods they lived in. Sears founder Richard Sears said the change of environment, particularly on lunch hour, allowed employees to come back to work, quote, forgetful of the little annoyances of the morning. Maybe that's an unintended acknowledgement on the part of Mr. Sears that working for his company could be annoying. But, you know, it's all kind of like the offices we have today of certain tech companies where you have cafes, daycare, yoga studios, everything right there on site. In the 1970s, Sears began a slow process of vacating their Lawndale headquarters for a certain downtown skyscraper we've all heard of. Thousands of jobs disappeared from North Lawndale over the next 2 decades. So this, combined with extended disinvestment and racist housing policies, really had a powerful negative effect on the neighborhood.
Yeah, Jeffrey, I was just in North Lawndale several weeks ago for our In Your Neighborhood series. But exactly what is a sunken garden?
Yes. Okay. To the question. Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like: a planned, usually quite ornate garden, and you just take a few steps down to get into it. Landscape architects use them to create drama, kind of a sense of topographical variation that could be appreciated from outside the garden on the edge or from inside the garden as you looked out. Sunken gardens were popular in England in the 1800s, and they gained popularity in the United States after they were showcased at the 1876 Philadelphia World's Fair. So they were usually quite formal, and they could include statues and fountains and other structures like this classically designed pergola that's still standing at the Sears Garden. There was a fountain there once, but it's been removed. There are other sunken gardens around the city. This one is the Jens Jensen designed formal garden in Humboldt Park, just north of Division Street. Jensen is today much more famous for his prairie-style landscape designs that featured native plants and forms. And he would, in fact, later describe this formal garden as, quote, the folly of my youth. The Humboldt Park garden has had issues with flooding over the years for a variety of reasons, sunken garden. And while Sears was in operation, its garden was maintained by a whole team of groundskeepers.
And Jeffrey, what is the status of the Sears garden today?
Well, like the rest of the remaining Sears complex, the garden is a Chicago landmark, although it has faded a bit from its original grandeur. Over the past few years, several North Lawndale community groups have banded together to restore the grounds, and they're raising money for landscaping and design costs. Their goal is to use this space as a way to honor the neighborhood's history, from the time when it was predominantly a Jewish enclave in the early 20th century to the contributions of African Americans from the 1960s right through today.
I'll bet it's something that the community there, the neighbors there, could appreciate today as well.
Yes, and gardens, think gardens while we're in this midst of snow. Garden.
Just keep that in your mind. And don't forget that you can visit our website for more details about the Sears Sunken Garden. And while you're there, don't forget to submit your own question to Jeffrey Bear. That's at WTTW.com/AskJeffrey. And of course, our thanks to Jeffrey, and that is our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Weekend Review. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and warm, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, sponsoring a free continuing legal education program for over a decade for lawyers across the state.
This evening's presentation of